Hello and welcome to the Comedian's Paradise, where we talk to illustrious, gorgeous, and
Ooh.
fantastic people from across the comedy world who inspire comedians like you and me to chase the laughs on our own terms. Now, today's guest has the name Maureen, and she has the name of Younger, which means you bet she has the coolest name in comedy.
Oh, I'd never thought of that, but thanks. You know what? People sometimes think it's a stage name. Like people have said to me, is Maureen a stage name? And I'm like, yeah. I called myself Maureen to add a bit of glamour to the act. I mean,
Ah,
no. I wish I had the stage name. I never thought about it at the time, but
it's a great name. It's cool. It sounds stylish.
okay, I'll go with that.
You don't believe? Uh, my name's Marvin McCarthy, and a lot of people say that sounds quite nice as well. But I think that sounds very sort of posh. A lot of people say that I sound posh, like I got called an Asian Hugh Grant in New York.
Yeah, but Americans don't really understand British accents anyway, so I wouldn't take that seriously.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I remember being in America and somebody said to me, oh, do you speak like that all the time? And I was like, yeah, I do. Yeah, I do.
They've got a fascination with us, haven't they?
Well, who can blame them?
Oh, of course, yeah. I mean, full English breakfast. How can you not love it? And so, thanks for coming on the podcast
Oh,
with
no,
me.
no worries.
Like, tell us a bit about yourself. Like, how did you become a comic? I know that you spoke to Simon Kane. You spoke about how many like things used to be very blokey, like oh, in the kitchen sort of stuff.
can't, can't remember what. Well, I mean, I had lots of jobs, lots of different stupid jobs, and then I got to a point where I was very depressed in my life, and I talked to a friend who's also a counsellor, and unawares to me, I kept cracking jokes, even though I was very depressed and crying my eyes out. I kept cracking jokes, and she was like, "Oh, you should do stand up," and I was like, "I don't think so." I'd been to one gig in the 80s. Never went to stand up. Wasn't interested in stand up. Couldn't have named a stand up really, apart from perhaps Jack D, who was on the TV at the time. And she kept insisting, so I started going. So I went on a course basically to shut her up. And I actually was quite good. I was probably the best in the class. To be fair, the standard was really low.
Oh,
Right? Not blowing my trumpet here. It was a really low standard. I mean, there was one woman who was German, and her jokes were puns of words that were puns in German, but not in English. So you had to speak German in order to realise it was a pun. I mean, that's very niche, and it wasn't funny. So it was a very low standard, but I was like, oh, I can actually do this, and I just started doing it, and and I didn't really take it seriously at first. I kind of did a couple of gigs a month, and I just started doing it more and more.
yeah. And did you do acting at the same time as it or beforehand?
Not really. I had done acting before, and I'd been to drama school. I mean, I technically I was an actor, but I wasn't a resting actor. So basically, um, I wasn't acting. I was temping. That's what I was doing.
Ah,
It's that thing where you send off a few letters, and you might go to the odd audition, but I wasn't really working as an actor. So I really was temping, which is the reason I was so depressed, because it was a mind-blowingly boring job. I was with people I liked, and I could get away with murder there, but it wasn't very intellectually demanding.
is that also a statement that we should perhaps ascribe to comedians that we only call ourselves a comic unless we're full time, or should we?
I have to say, it's really annoying when you get people who've done about 12 gigs and they call themselves, they say they make out they're a professional comedian. Or I've seen this where someone was an open spot perhaps for a few months, then they do another job, and then they're on TV and they're like former stand up, and it's like, but you did a couple of gigs, you know what I mean? You did I don't know, 20 gigs. You weren't a professional stand up.
Not unless you're Jeff Innocent and you decide to walk out and do acting. That would be a story.
Oh, I don't know about that.
No, yeah, I know what you mean. Like, unless you've got the credentials, don't talk about them.
Oh, it's not that. It's just that, but you give people a false idea. It's like if you're doing amateur dramatics. I suppose you could call yourself an actor, but it's not really in the same league as someone who's earning a living from it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. No.
I don't know if that makes me sound snobby, but it is a bit annoying when you've got someone. And I remember this woman, I should say, and she was saying, she's an ex-comic, and I'd gigged with her a couple of times. I was like, no, you weren't a professional stand-up by a long chalk. But it looks, people are always impressed if you say you're a comic, don't they?
Yeah, there seems to be an odd demeanor. They think it's just like anything scary. You give it a go a couple of times, and then it often doesn't become as scary.
Yeah, I've never found stand-up really scary. I've never found it scary.
Oh,
No.
never.
I mean, there's a couple of gigs where I've been like, oh, listen, but generally, no.
Hmm.
I mean, if they don't like you, they don't like you. You do your time and you fuck off. I don't know if you can swear on this, but I mean, do you know what I mean?
Go
It's
ahead.
like, I mean, not everyone's going to like you. I mean, that's just a fact. I mean, obviously, as a comic, what you want is most of the people, most of the time, to like you. That
Yeah.
way you get work. But, some people aren't going to find you funny. Some people aren't going to find you funny as soon as you walk on stage. In my case, because I'm a middle-aged woman and they don't want to listen to a middle-aged woman. Or because I'm a bullshit woman. But what you've got to realise is the very reasons that some people won't like you are the very same reasons why some people will really like you.
That sounds exactly like dating.
I wouldn't know. I haven't dated for years. But you know what I mean? It's like you can't not everyone is gonna like you. And yeah, it's horrible when you die. I mean, no one wants to, and of course it's it's bad when you're an open spot. It's even worse when you're professional because as you know, you've got to do your time. Also you might not get paid. And there was nothing worse. I mean, I did a gig once where they hate is too weak a word. They absolutely hated me. And I looked at my watch and about 18 minutes left. And I had to just stand there and just to basically silence because I wanted to get paid at the end of the day.
So
As an open spot, you could just walk off. I mean, who cares?
you said something that's very intriguing there because I spoke to a comic called Casey McNeil in Boston.
Right.
He told me that like what you said there, that Margaret Cho, they were doing a college gig
Mm.
and like he was bombing, but he was trying to improve the crowd. But he said what made her great was she is who she is, and there's no you either like it or you don't.
Mm.
And then I also hear stories about like how Russell Hicks was able to turn like for 10 minutes he was bombing, but then he found a way to hook him in, and then the last 10 minutes he smashed it.
I mean, you do. I mean, there are some comics. I'm not one of them. Like, so if I'm not doing well, I will try and win the audience round, or do banter, or do whatever. There are some comics, and I do. I admire them. If they die, they just carry on doing what they're doing, and they don't care that the audience doesn't like them. I think it's very brave, but I think as a promoter, it's really you'd rather have somebody turn the audience around and like you. Do you know what I mean? But I do know comics who will do that, and I do find that quite a brave choice. I will try and win the audience round, but there's only so much you can do, isn't it? You do try and play the room and try and get them on side and try and figure out a way. I mean, the more experienced you are, the more skilled you are, the more material you've got. It makes it easier, but sometimes you just can't win them round.
What's been an instance where you turn around to someone who is like, "Yo, I don't like Maureen," but then they turn into putty in your hand.
I mean, there have been occasions because I've done gigs where that I walk on as a middle-aged woman, and so you can see them thinking, oh, because people are prejudiced against. They think middle-aged women are going to be rubbish at anything. Just if you ever saw the Susan Boyle clip when she walked on stage, everyone, the judges, audience, all assumed she was going to be rubbish because she committed the worst crime a middle-aged woman could do. She looked middle-aged, and so there is that assumption. So you can see people's faces, and then you start doing your act, and you're like, and they're like, oh. Do you know what I mean? It's interesting sometimes because you're kind of playing against their prejudices, and that's a great thing about comedy. You can play against people's prejudices, or you can, because often the thing with comedy is like we're not as PC as we think we are or we'd like to be. So comics will say jokes, and people will laugh at jokes and think, "Oh, shouldn't we be laughing at that?" But it's a way of letting off steam in a way. Do you know what I mean? Because we all have thoughts and beliefs that we probably wouldn't want to admit to, perhaps at a dinner party.
And we're the ones that let it all out.
And we it's kind of a valve system. The trouble is some people don't get that, and they kind of hear the words and they get triggered by certain words and don't realise it's a joke. And what the you know, what the target of the joke is, because they hear certain words now, and people like to get offended sometimes, you know, and you're like,
Oh
yeah, you've
yes,
got
yes.
offended, but if you're going to get offended, don't go to comedy. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So if, I don't want to say it, but a friend, a comic who I know on the circuit says that those people who get offended at certain things now were the same things that would have got offended at maybe the very same things that we're preaching about back in the 60s and 70s.
I think the problem is now that when people get offended, they feel like you should stop what you're doing. So the fact that they're offended means that you should stop what you're doing, or you should not be working anymore. Or, you know, it's, you know, there was a comic recently. Somebody came up, complained about one of his jokes, and said you should be banned from this club. And he went, "We'll go and have a word with them." And the club turned around and just basically laughed. And this woman got very upset. But it's like because you're offended that somehow that joke is invalid, and it's not. You know, you're entitled to be offended. I mean, I've listened to so-called comics say stuff which I'm fuming about. But you know, half the time when people get offended, it's because they don't actually understand how comedy works.
Yeah, but you have to sometimes tread the line to get.
Yeah. And the thing is with a comic, like you know, the biggest laugh is when you take those risks where you're kind of on the precipice. And sometimes it'll work and sometimes it won't, but you only know once you've done it, you know? And also what people forget is the audience give you permission in a way. So like a certain act can go on and say one thing. I mean, I've seen this. So a certain act can go on, he can say stuff because the audience will give him permission or her permission to say that. But another comic would say it. The audience won't give you permission. The audience will be furious. You know, it's like all comics know. If you've got something, you put your kind of perhaps risque stuff, you put it in the middle. You never put it with the front open. So I've got stuff, if I said it in the front, it would really piss people off. But you do it 10 minutes into your set. By this point, hopefully they like you. They find you funny. They know where you're coming from. They will find that material funny. You did it 10 minutes earlier, they'll be absolutely livid. Because half of comedy is psychology. It's working the room, figuring out the audience, figuring out what jokes you're going to do to win the audience round, what jokes you might want to leave out. You know, it's all that. Who to talk to, who not to talk to. You know, it's
Yeah.
you know, and sometimes as a comic you get it wrong. You know, you get it wrong. You know, you misjudge an audience or you misjudge a joke. You know, it happens.
Yeah, that's it's amazing how much goes into it. Like I spoke to Danny McGinley, and he wrote that great article on like MCing.
Right.
And I know that I've seen a lot of amateur MCs like say what you do for a job or whatever.
We all do
But
that.
yeah, but they say that sort of right at the start, sort of fresh. But what he did is he just gets in the chair, so that, as you said, the psychology, he finds out who wants to be talked to and who doesn't. And he does
I
it
mean,
3 times.
for me, you can often tell. So because I MC a lot, so I avoid people who want to be talked to because they're going to be a pain in the butt because they want the show to be about them, and it's not going to be about them. So I avoid them like the plague. I avoid people who like they're going to cry if you're going to. You know, some people don't want to be talked to, and they get very, you know, they're really upset. Ignore them, leave them alone, and then you know you try. Hopefully, you find that the people in between who don't mind being talked to, but don't want to be the show about, don't want the show to be about them.
Is this saying true in that with a lot of MCs, if you're a great MC, it'll make you a great comic? Don't they?
It can be like you get some people who only do sets. You get some people who do who just MC, and sometimes I mean there can be, it can be a what do you call it, two-sided sword. That's not what it, double-edged sword. That's it. So sometimes if you MC too much, when you do your set, you end up MCing your set rather than doing a set. So that can be a disadvantage. But as an MC, it means that you're very good. You've got a strong muscle with banter and stuff like that. So if it's a hard room, you can banter with the audience, you can play with the audience, and also when you're MCing, you sometimes come up with material. I've done that where you know you say something as an ad lib, it gets a big laugh, and you're like, okay, that's going in the set. I mean, I would say if you can be a good MC, that's a really good string to your bow, and you will get more work if you can MC well. But you've also got to allow yourself not to be that good an MC. I when I started MCing, I wasn't as good as I wanted to be, so I stopped. And then I realized that the only way I could be as good as I wanted to be was by allowing myself to be not that good and working at it and getting better. So I did that thing that all MCs do when they first start out, divided my set into 3 and did, 1/3 of the jokes at the beginning, 1/2 joke in the next another joke at the next section. And then you get better. But you've got to allow yourself as a comic to get better. You're not going to be whoever you think's your favourite comic. You're not going to be, I don't know, whoever you think, Frankie Ball, Michael McIntyre, or whatever it is, Jack D, Lee Mack. You're not going to be that after 5 months. You've got to allow yourself to learn the trade.
Is that something that's maybe, what was it like beforehand? Like when you first started in terms of famous comics, did comics go in straight away thinking they're doing that? Or is that a trend that's happening now?
No, I don't think so. But you got comic. What you always get is when I first started, Frankie Boyle was really fashionable. So you got a lot of would-be Frankie Boyles. And what they forget is Frankie Boyle is probably one of the best joke writers in the country, if not the best. His joke writing is outstanding. And so, but what they hear is just somebody saying something and they think, oh, he said something, it's offensive, so I'm going to say something offensive. And they haven't actually written a joke. That isn't, he's written quality jokes, absolutely quality jokes. He's not gone there and said, I'm just going to say something offensive. And so what you got was, when I started comedy, is a lot of comics just saying stuff that was offensive. There was no joke in it. There was no comedy in it. It was just, look at me, I'm saying something really offensive. And they forgot all the hard work that Frankie does. If you ever watch Frankie, I don't know if you have, his writing is out of the world. He's such a good comedy joke writer. And he might say stuff where you're kind of going, oh my God, I can't believe, but it's funny because he's written a very good joke and he's making a point. And he's a highly intelligent guy. And I think that's the problem. You sometimes get comics, want to be the next Sarah Millican. But, Sarah Millican, again, writes absolutely brilliant jokes and they go really well with her persona.
He's changed a lot now, though, hasn't he? Like he's a lot lighter. He's a lot more, from what I've seen. Like
Okay.
More. He's a lot more political now, isn't he?
I don't know about lighter. I saw him live recently,
okay.
And he was hilarious. I was sitting actually next to Kerry Godleman.
Oh.
The jokes, we were like blinking heck. They were so good though. They were brilliant jokes. And if you want to watch somebody who's at the top of the game, I'd go and watch Frankie Boyle.
And who else is on your comedy? Like who's in your?
I love people like Andy Askins. Have you seen Andy Askins?
Not yet.
Oh, he's fantastic. He's such a good comedian. He's brilliant. It's like a totally packed set of really good jokes. He's got his own, what do you call it? USP, is that what it is? Yes, USP. And he's just brilliant. Very, very funny. Obviously, like Zoe Lyons is amazing. If you watch Zoe. Like she used to run this gig called Bent Double and she would compare it just saying new material. And her new material was so good. It was like, bloody hell. So it meant when you had to go on it at your A game because, otherwise the audience would just go, come here for Zoe back. And she was doing new material.
God. Yeah, I've heard stories about that with Louis C.K. as well. Like he did such a good new material that the host struggled to come back after him.
It is interesting if you watch somebody like Zoe and it's all new stuff and you're like, blinking heck, how can that be new and be so good? And so hilarious. But anyway, that's Zoe for you. Bloody good comic.
So with all these sort of things you got in your hat, like you're MC, you're an actress, and you're a comedian, does that give you perhaps a more balanced view of a lot of things and how they work?
I think, having trained as an actor, it gave me an advantage in that I had stagecraft. So I used to run a gig in Birmingham, which was an L-shaped room, and it was amazing the amount of comics that just used to play to the front. and ignore the people to the left. Was an actor, you should be playing the whole room. So like if you're doing a big theatre, you don't just look at the stalls, you look up. I mean, you can't see anybody, but they don't know that. No, but you look up at the gods so people feel included. So it gives you a bit of stagecraft. I mean, on the downside, it meant I used to project even when I had a mic. So I was unnecessarily loud because I just used to. So that was a disadvantage. I think acting can be a problem. You get some actors trying to be stand-ups, and they act being a stand-up, so it doesn't work. You can't act being a stand-up. There's no fourth wall. It's got to seem like it's just you. That's the first time. You're just talking. It's not a comedy monologue. But I think comedy can help acting because as a comic, you're working with words. You know how to play with words. You know how to get effects from words. That's your job. You know about timing. You know about playing with words. So it can be very helpful I think when you're acting the other way around.
Because I remember I did an acting class and one of the directors said that to me, and I thought that was quite an interesting point. That he says a lot of funny people make great actors. I mean, I know Walter White, the guy that plays him, is an incredible actor, and I've seen a couple of examples of it. But I don't know. I feel that might be a sweeping statement just to say something like that.
I don't know, because I think comedy is kind of underrated. So if you look at the Oscars, comedies never get awards, never got Oscars. They're kind of, they're just dismissed as comedy. Comedy is very difficult to do. I mean, there was a great, you're probably too young, Norman Wisdom was a great comedian. I saw him when I was a kid. I was about 7, and I still remember in Bournemouth. He was like the top star in the 50s Britain. And he did a really good drama, I think, towards the end of his life. I mean, you don't have to be a good comedian to be a good actor. I don't think Laurence Olivier was a stand-up before he went on to win all his theatre awards. But I think it can be an advantage because also you've spent your whole life saying words, saying text, and making it seem like that's the first time you've said it. That's what you do, and people are you will be amazed. I've had people come up to me and they're really surprised that you repeat a joke. Like they think you just say it that once and that's it, and you're like, you've got to be kidding me, mate. But that's even I've got ad libs in my set. These ad libs I've had for 2 years. But you make them you do them in a way that people think that that's the first time you said it. So you're kind of acting in a way that you're not acting in a way, if that makes sense.
I remember one of the things that I was told in the class when people were acting is that they'll keep repeating the same line again and again to get the same result until they got annoyed, and then they got that emotional response. But I also hear from I don't take what people say at face. I'm just taking what they say. And then one of the comics, Sam Russell, says one thing he hates in comedy is seeing a monologue, and what he does to make it look like it's just come off the fly is he changes things slightly so that the body, it performs as if it's something new. Is that something you do as well?
I don't know. I think you might do it instinctively. I think that you change because different rooms, different atmosphere. But when you bed in a joke, sometimes you will change it. So suddenly So I've got a joke, and for some reason one day it's got the word Scottish in it. I whispered it, and it gets a laugh. I have no idea why, so I kept it in. Yeah, I have no idea why whispering Scottish gets a laugh, but it does. And you bed things in, you play with stuff. That's sometimes the joke comes out beautifully formed, but sometimes it's you add a word here, take a word there, change it a little bit, change the setup a bit. You just play with it. And also it's an audience. So the thing with comedy, what you want is to go back and forth. And the other thing with jokes it's not necessarily what you're saying that's funny, it's your reaction to what you're saying. That's what people find funny, is your reaction. So if you think of a lot of comedy characters, Basil Fawlty or Sister Michael in the Derry Girls, it's not necessarily what she's saying, or it's partly what she's saying, but it's also her reaction to what she's saying. That's what people are laughing at. And so depending on the audience, it's an energy going back and forth. So, your reaction will change, or your actions will change depending on how the audience are reacting.
How important is getting jokes for your persona? Like, because I know that Dave Thompson said something like, with Sean Mayer, he's a very smart sort of counter person, saying that he's smarter than the audience.
Right, yeah.
Whilst Dave plays the buffoon.
Yeah, you've got, they won't work otherwise. So if I had jokes and to make out I was a timid, shy woman, no one would laugh because it's not believable. People just be like, and you sometimes get that. You get people, I've seen this where this woman was doing jokes, kind of gross out sex stuff. And you watched her and it, may be true, but you just kind of go, you didn't do that. Like, there's not 1 second did you believe that she did all this. They were the wrong jokes for her. I had somebody once send me, like a former comic, she wrote some jokes for me and I couldn't use them because it was like, that's not me. That's not my voice. Your voice has got to match your persona. Or you won't get laughs because people won't believe it.
What would you describe your comedy persona, and what was the point that you realised who you were on stage?
I think my comedy is like bullshit woman, basically. It is. I'm a bullshit woman, and that's it, really. I think. And because you don't realise entirely how you come across, but then then you get enough feedback, and I do have, I would say, quite a strong personality on stage. Let's put it that way. And so my set has got to go with that kind of personality, or else people would be like, doesn't make sense. You know what I mean? I mean, in a way, how I look, because when I look, I look like I'm about to go on my first cruise, because I'm always in a frock and I'm in little shoes and, fishnet tights. And then I open my mouth and people are like, oh, okay. She's not, it's completely different. But it goes with my thing. And that's, as a comic, you do need that. You need to be different from all the other comics. There's no point trying to be the next, I don't know, Lee Mack, or the next Frankie Ball, or whoever, Sean Walsh or whatever. Because, the original ones are going to be the best version. What you need to do is be yourself. And the only person that can do you is you. You can be the best you that can be. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it's the dodgy edges that make people interesting. Like,
it's the what edges?
What I mean by dodgy edges, like, look at Trigger. It's his faults that make him funny, or
Yeah,
like
I mean,
Hellboy, or like Rodney.
Trigger was great but also it was his reactions, because he had no idea he was an idiot. Do you know what I mean? He didn't think he was an idiot. What he was saying made perfect sense, and that's what makes it funny. Because he clearly thought he was as bright as everyone else.
Yeah.
And Rodney was really called Dave, so there wasn't a problem for him there. And and what it is, in order to be, I think, really funny on stage, you've got to find your voice, and you can spend years. That's the hardest thing in comedy, is finding your voice, because what you tend to do is be a version of yourself on stage, as a comic. And then if you can find your voice, you will be funnier as you. So I'm always funnier the more I'm me. And I used to find that I used to run gigs in London and Birmingham, and I was definitely funny at my gigs because I was more relaxed. I mean, I wasn't going to sack myself. Even if I had a bad gig, I'd be like, well, I'm back next month. You know what I mean? So I was completely relaxed, and I was definitely a lot funnier because I would take more risks. You need to take risks as a comic, and it's hard. So if you go into a big club and you're doing your first 10 there, you're not going to take risks. You're going to do your safe 10 minutes because you want to get into that club. So, but I think, there comes a point when you start finding your voice, and you think, oh, this is actually my real voice. This is me. And I think that's what makes you funny. But that can take years.
What are your tips for a comic that's, if they're listening now, like, Maureen, could you give me some tips on finding my voice?
Okay. Oh, I don't know. Well, I mean, I think the two tips are basically gig a lot, write a lot. That's it. Gig and write, and don't be a dick. I mean, that's the three things you need: gig a lot, write a lot, try and turn over your material, and don't be a dick. Because you'll find that who gets you work are other comics. Other comics will recommend you to promoters, and they'll only recommend you if they're good. I had friends who weren't very good. I would never recommend them, because comics don't do that, because it reflects badly on you. And you recommend people because they're good and also because they're not dicks. You know, if you've got, you know, when I, you know, if you've got, I've been asked to book a lot of comedy nights over the time. If you've got to spend 3 hours in a car journey, on a car journey, there, 3 hours back, I don't care how funny somebody is. If they're a dickhead, I ain't booking them. Do you know what I mean? It's like life's too short. And so, yeah, I think that's the 3 rules. Just gig right, and just don't be a dick.
How am I doing so far?
I don't know. Well, I can't know about your writing, but you know what I mean. It's like but I think that's the same in any business, and it is weird sometimes that. And also, don't just be like. Sometimes you get people that they're nice to other comics, they're nice to promoters, but they're dicks to the other people in the club. Don't be dicks to other people in the club. That is, I personally find that really annoying, and also it's very short-sighted because most like in a lot of clubs, all the people in the club report back. Will report back. I know someone, an open spot, who was really rude to the sound guy, dismissed them, tech, not interested. Didn't realise that the sound guy writes the show reports. You know, and then had a bad gig. And I know this guy, he's a really nice guy, you know, and it's like, why are you being such a dick to that person? You know? And also you don't know, you know, the person who's, I don't know, who's sorting out the tickets, you know, maybe the manager in a couple of years' time. You know, and people remember people who have been shit to them. You know?
Yeah, I noticed that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you know. I always know I've had a good gig when like security or someone who's working on the door comes up to me and says I've had a good gig. Because they've seen so much stuff that they tend to switch off. And you think if they really like it and they think it's funny, you've done well. You know, if you get the security going, that was a really good gig, you're like, oh my goodness. You know, I supported it was a brilliant job, the Naked Magicians for a month, Trafalgar Studios. And I used to like banter for 10 minutes and do 10 minutes of material. And the ushers used to watch every day. And I was like, and I knew that was to me that was a great sign because they've seen my act. They could just go off in the hall or somewhere, but they, you know, they would come in and watch. And I thought, well, yeah, I'm doing well here. So be nice to people, and don't be like people. Don't be dicks to the MC. That's another bad move, because often if you're a regular MC at a club, you know, you're often the eyes and ears of the promoter. He will say, "Oh, how did so and so do?" You know, and you report back.
Yeah.
You know, it's a business, and I think you know, comics can be very supportive. You know, a lot of them. You know, they will have. You know, because you know, when you write to promoters, you're just another email half the time. You know, they'll ignore you, and it's nothing personal. It's just, you know, you're another email in their inbox. But if a comic goes, oh, you know what, I saw Marvin, he was really good, you should give him a tryout. It means when you write in next, you go, oh yeah, you know what I mean? You've got more of a chance.
Yeah, it's yeah. Well, one thing I found, like with marketing gigs as a whole, the soft approach works better than just the straight digital marketing. It means so much more. Like I've seen there's so many people come back to shows because someone's recommended it rather than anything else. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you've got a small night. I mean, I ran small nights. I knew almost everybody by name, you know, because they felt invested in the show.
Yeah.
You know, it's really easy to, you know, it's the other way around. It's hard to, you know, used to have a really good audience. It's really hard to get an audience. It's really easy to lose them. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, I see it so many times. I mean, I've seen it with so many stars that I've seen. Like they say one thing, like True Geordie said something that was a bit iffy, or you see lots of social media stars that they say one thing and then they boom.
Yeah, I mean that's a problem with social media, isn't it? Because people can always say something, and you know it can be misconstrued, or
Yeah.
you know you didn't think, you misspoke or whatever.
Yeah, I'm sure if you recorded every conversation of every human being on earth, you would find something that's a bit iffy.
Yeah, and we all say stuff like, there's nobody's not said something they would not want put in public. Do you know what I mean?
Not a single person.
No, I mean just absolutely isn't.
What would you say of instances where like you've made a mistake and you've done something you rub someone up the wrong way and then it's changed years down the line. Because Jeff Whiting told me situations of like when he's booking gigs, there'll be like comedy couples that have split up for a while, they don't get on, but then like a few months later or a year later, they're cool and they can gig with each other again.
Oh, okay. Well, I haven't had that. I'm trying to think. I mean, I must have wound people up. I wouldn't be very surprised if I haven't. I can't think of anything off the top of my head, to be honest.
That's cool. Yeah, I found that a lot from, yeah. Now, when you run a lot of, I know that I listened to your podcast with Simon Kane about running
Right.
female only comedy night.
Yeah.
What was, how did that change your way of doing comedy in terms of and putting on comedy shows?
I think putting on comedy shows makes you realise how annoying comedians can be. So I would recommend everybody to run a night for a couple of months, and then you find out how irritating some comics are, and then just make sure you don't do what they're doing. Do you know what I mean? Like not turning up really late, not turning up at all, not telling you they're not going to turn up, like not reading emails. Like I would write an email, all the details would be there, and then you get somebody phoning you up going, "What time does the gig start?" Well, it's on the email. You can always just read where is it? Well, why don't you just read? It's not in Narnia. You just read the email. I mean, things like that. It does make you appreciate. I think that one of the most important things, besides being funny, is reliability. There's certain comics where they're great, but you just never know if they're going to cancel on you at the last minute, and you're just like, I can't be bothered to deal with that now. You know what I mean? You got someone like Barbara Nice, who's amazing. You book Barbara Nice, she'll be there. Rain, storm, whatever, she'll be there. She's an old school professional, and I think that's it. Just makes you realise what not to do and what to do to endear yourself to a promoter. Basically, just turn up, be funny, don't be a dick.
Be chill.
Yeah.
No.
And also, I think what's annoying is sometimes, if you do smaller gigs, you'll get somebody do your gig and they think they're too big for your gig. So they're really dismissive. Like they come on stage, they're not that bothered. I think I should be doing this gig. And it's really annoying as the promoter. And it's like, if you think you're too big for the gig, don't say yes. Just don't do the gig. Because, people have paid.
Yeah. Well, it's funny when you say a statement like that, because I've found like Matt Price is like is very good, very sort of pretty high
Lovely
up
bloke,
there.
yeah.
Yeah, but I've never had any sort of funny business from him.
No, he's a really nice guy. Really nice guy.
But I had someone who came in to do my gig. There was maybe a small audience there, about 10, and the night didn't go well. But straight away he was disrespecting the audience and all the acts there, and then he
Don't
left
book
back
him
and
again.
Yeah, I didn't, and I won't. But it's the way he wondered why I didn't do too well at the end. Like you're getting off to the wrong start, and
yeah, I mean, it's yeah, and it's really funny because then you meet some of the bigger names in comedy, and they're lovely. They're absolutely lovely.
Is it because they've always been like that, or is it because they're quite content?
I don't know. I don't know, but I think being nice probably doesn't harm your career, does it?
Yeah. Occasionally, sometimes I've been nice and been done over, but most of the time.
Well, I mean, there is that, but as a general rule, if you're nicer, it doesn't,
No, most people are pretty chill.
like Zoe used to do my gig, which is a very small gig, and she's definitely a very successful comedian, but she would never go on with that attitude. She would, and that's a professional. She would give a good show, even though it was only 40 people. Do you know what I mean? And that's the sign of a professional comic.
So I mean, comedy is bloody fun. It's a lot of fun. Whatever level you are, if you're on stage and it's a fun.
It can be fun. I mean, sometimes
when it doesn't go well.
Sometimes it's not fun, and the travelling's a pain in the ass. But yeah.
If they invented Star Trek warp thingy,
Oh,
how would you feel?
that'd be perfect.
Energize.
Because the travelling is just, and also it's now ridiculously expensive. When I first started, you could get a train for £7.50 to Manchester.
That is, whoa.
And it wasn't that long ago. I mean, I'm not talking about the 1960s. You know what I mean? It was, it was relatively, I don't know, about 10, 15 years ago or something. But now, a return to Manchester is £100. Well, who's got, it puts you off going to gigs because you're like, well, I'm going to spend most of my money on travelling.
Yeah. Is that one thing that you would change in comedy?
Oh, travelling. I mean, you have to travel. I mean, saying that, I'm going to Ireland this weekend. So you have to travel for your job. But I think, it's one of the least enjoyable aspects. You can travel 2.5 hours, say 3 hours, and you're doing 20 minutes, or something. I've just been booked to Hungary, so I'm going off to Budapest,
Oh.
and you're just going, to do 20 minutes on stage. I mean, Budapest, it's a nice city. But yeah, there's a lot of travel. It's always funny when you hear new comics moan about traveling. You're like, you might be in the wrong job.
Oh. Now, we spoke this on the podcast. You're a lady of many languages. So, parlez-vous français?
Je parle français, oui, c'est vrai.
Tu fais quoi comme travail?
Le plus peu que possible.
Oh, okay. C'est bien. C'est tout. What's it like performing a lot of different nationalities and like doing comedy in different names? Do you get treated like a star? Do you get people saying?
No, I mean, there is a certain kudos if you say you're from London, I think. I think when you just got to, I think there's certain things when you go abroad you've got to take into account. If it's predominantly not English audiences, speak slower, enunciate. Be wary of using British English because other Anglophones won't understand it. It's like half four. That means nothing to an Australian or American. They've got no idea what half four means. Get rid of British references. I mean, or not all British references, but kind of very eclectic ones. I did a gig with somebody in Cologne, and she talked about Arthur Scargill. And not only do you have to be British, but you have to be of a certain age to know who Arthur Scargill is. I mean, me and my mum was with me. Me and my mum understood the reference. No one else got it. I've had somebody talk about Edgware Road in Berlin. Like, no one knows what Edgware Road means in Britain. You probably don't even know what it means in Glasgow. So it's like you've got to think about certain jokes might not work in certain countries, or the references won't work. So you've got to think about that. But I did a gig in the middle of France, in the middle of nowhere in France, and the audience were 99.9% British. So I could do, it was like just gigging in Britain. It was, I mean, I was in France, but I might as well have been I could have been anywhere, Southend. I mean, it was just, it was a predominantly English British audience. But I think if you're gigging abroad, you've just got to think about certain things. And also what I find really annoying is when you hear British comics state the obvious. So like if you're in Holland, you'll get British comics going, oh, you've got a lot of bicycles. You think, yeah, the Dutch know that. I mean, no Dutch person is surprised by this. Or, there's a lot of canals. Or German has a lot of long words. It's just like, oh, yeah, interesting. So, if you're going to make comments about the country, just do it. Just be slightly more original.
Okay. So what's going on my G? Yeah, like I went popping down the street, yeah, and I went and did some b-ball and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, people aren't going to understand it. So it's, but like if you go abroad, generally, like say Germany, they're really nice audiences. They're very nice. They're very polite. They're not drunk. They turn up early. It's very different to the British audience. You don't need to be as perhaps, I suppose aggressive is too strong a word, but sometimes in London, say, you need to make sure people know that you're in control. Which you don't really need that in Berlin because they're just nice.
Ah, nice. But they're not nicer than Austrians.
No, Austrians have got a better sense of humour.
Of course.
Austrian humour is Austrian humour is fantastic.
Oh.
I love Austrian humour. I won't bore you to death, but I do love Austrian humour.
No,
Find it hilarious.
you
And
made
it's very different from German humour. Austrians would say because they've got a sense of humour, but it's very different from German humour. And it's very funny sometimes watching Austrians and Germans together in Austria, and the Austrians will be taking the piss, and some Germans have got no idea what's going on. It is very, very. I mean, I'm in hysterics. The German will be thinking they won't get it.
They've always come across, from what I've come across, very methodical.
Who? Austrians?
No, like Germans. That I've come
Germans.
across from the selection I've come across, not all, but
Okay. I can't really
That's not
comment. I mean, I
wrong.
lived in Germany. Only lived in Germany for 3 months, so I was mainly in Austria. And Austria, I just yeah, I do. I love they've got Austria's got a great sense for the absurd. You know.
Okay, you made me want to research Austrian humour now.
It's difficult because I think unless you speak Austrian German, it's kind of hard to appreciate, because a lot of Austrian humour is in the language, and you know, the register and the dialect and type of words they're using, and yeah, I mean, people are going to be snoring at this bit, but I personally find it very, very funny. And when I read, there's a great writer, Wolf Haas, that I read, and it's very Austrian, and I just absolutely love his books because it just reminds me of Vienna.
Oh, that's okay. You better pay Maureen. She's plugging the book and the podcast.
I don't think his books are. I think like his books aren't really translated into English. I don't think, which is a shame because he's bloody hilarious.
Now, for anyone that's 2 questions I would like to ask. What is your one bit of advice for getting better as a comic, and what is your thing for if people want to find out about you?
Okay, cool. The one thing about getting better as a comic is what I've said before, is basically gig and write. Gigging and write. You know, when you're an open spot, you play a lot of horrible gigs. I remember this. It's horrible. Sometimes you just lose the will to live, but it does teach you how to play a room. You don't appreciate it at the time, but you will appreciate it later on, because it makes you learn how to play a room, and it also gets rid of all the chaff. So people give up. Like, really, I worked with really good comics, people who had really good potential, who gave up because they just couldn't. You know, it was just too much hard work, and it's a shame, because the other thing about being any artist, it's not just having the talent or being good, it's the persistence and the tenacity. There's a lot of good people who get lost on the way, and you've just got to keep on going.
Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, if I'd known at the beginning how much I would have to do shitty little gigs, I probably wouldn't have done it. But luckily, as an open spot, you've got no idea, so you just go on blindly. You know, carry on. You just got to carry on and getting better. And the only way you can do it is by gigging and writing. You know, just that's what you do. Just the more you write, and bear in mind, you know, you will have to write a lot of shit jokes to write a good one. Do you know what I mean? Not every joke you're going to write is going to be comedy gold. I mean, if joke writing was easy, we'd all have a different 20 minutes every week. So, you know, you have to write stuff, and sometimes you just leave it, go away. I mean, I wrote stuff and I went back through some notes, found this joke, like, oh, actually, that's quite good. And I did it, and I actually started putting it in my set, and it gets a big laugh now. But at the time when I first did it, it didn't work. And then I came back and I just phrased it slightly differently, and it works. So that's it. Writing and gigging.
And for anyone that wants to follow you, where do they find out about you?
Oh, yes, because I
Is
need
it
to
on-
increase my social media. It's Maureen Younger on YouTube, so feel free to follow me on that. And on TikTok and Instagram, it's Maureen Younger as well. And on Facebook, it's My Comedy.
So guys, if you like Maureen, you know where to go. Make sure you get this podcast a 10-star review on Amazon and iTunes.
Yes,
Make sure
please.
you give us both 50 quid.
Even better.
And hopefully I'll see you next episode.